Mosaic, a daily news program from Link TV, presents a selection of news reports from independent and state-controlled broadcasters from throughout the Middle East.
في الشأن السوداني تعهدت الحركة الشعبية لتحرير السودان التي كان يتزعمها جون غارانغ الذي لقي مصرعه في تحطم.
The Sudan People's Liberation Movement, which was led by John Garang, who was killed in a helicopter crash, vowed to carry out the peace agreement that was signed with the Sudanese government. A Ugandan official confirmed that a UN team found the wreckage of the helicopter and the remains of John Garang and 13 others who were on the helicopter that took off from Uganda to an isolated area in southern Sudan on the border with Kenya and Uganda. In Nairobi, the deputy of John Garang said that the helicopter belonging to the Ugandan President Yoweri Museveni crashed in the city of Miyukost. Meanwhile, at least 24 people were killed, among them police officers, in riots in Khartoum today after the official announcement of the death of John Garang, the Sudanese vice president, in a helicopter crash. A team from Abu Dhabi TV was able to shoot some images of the riots and looting in the capital of Khartoum. A police official said that more bodies were found earlier. Riots against Arabs took place in Tuba, a large city in the south. 3 hours earlier, the Sudanese authorities announced a curfew lasting for 12 hours as violent riots broke out after the death of the southern Sudanese leader John Garang.
3 ساعات حظرا للتجوال لمدة 12 ساعة، وذلك بعد أعمال شغب عنيفة أعقبت وفاة الزعيم السوداني الجنوبي جون غارانغ.
Immediately after the Sudanese government confirmed the death of the first vice president and leader of the People's Liberation Army, Dr. John Garang, an atmosphere of sadness and anticipation was cast over Khartoum. The President Omar al-Bashir called for an emergency meeting of the Council of Ministers with the participation of representatives from the People's Movement. President Bashir, who appeared affected by the loss of his first vice president, renewed his government's commitment to the peace agreement that was signed with the People's Movement at the beginning of the year, considering this current period as the most sensitive period that Sudan is going through.
We have confidence in our brothers in the movement, and God willing, they will organize themselves quickly. According to the agreement and the constitution, the movement will decide who will replace John Garang.
The People's Movement, which continued holding intense meetings in the Kenyan capital of Nairobi, said that the leadership in Khartoum confirmed that it was an accident and that a comprehensive investigation will be carried out to gain more information.
What happened was an accident and nothing more. We must be patient and restrain ourselves. It will not deter us from going forward in the peace agreement.
Immediately after the announcement of the death of the leader of the People's Movement and the first Sudanese Vice President John Garang, the streets of Khartoum turned into chaos, vandalism, and looting. Gunfire went off in a number of commercial areas and tens of cars were vandalized. The police used rubber bullets and tear gas. During a joint press conference with the Foreign Minister, the Minister of Information confirmed that the government is prepared to deal with any security deterioration.
We hope that there will be calm and no deterioration, but it is normal that this will happen, and there are measures that can be taken.
Khartoum announced a period of mourning for 3 days, clarifying that measures are being taken to hold a funeral service after retrieving the body and transferring it to the Nusaid resort east of the equator. The death of Dr. John Garang represents a real and new test of the Sudanese ability to get through this phase and maintain the commitments and promises that were made between the government and the people's movement in Nafasha at the beginning of this year. Usama Abbas, Abu Dhabi TV, Khartoum.
Many Arab and world leaders are expected to attend King Fahd's funeral in Riyadh tomorrow. Samir Jamil has more details.
With deep sorrow and pain, the royal court mourns the death of the custodian of the holy mosques, King Fahd bin Abdulaziz, due to illness. This is how Saudi Information Minister Iyad bin Amin Madani announced the passing away of the late Saudi king on Saudi TV, which interrupted its regular programs for prayers. King Fahd, aged about 83, has been in hospital since May 27, when he was admitted with acute pneumonia. Medical sources said he died at around 6 a.m. local time. As soon as the announcement was made, recitations of the Quran echoed from mosques, radios, and television sets. Saudi official sources said King Fahd's funeral would take place tomorrow to give time for Arab and foreign dignitaries to arrive. Prayers for King Fahd's funeral are due to be said at the Imam Turki bin Abdullah Mosque in Riyadh. Saudis are to pledge alliances to new King Abdullah bin Abdulaziz and his Crown Prince Sultan bin Abdulaziz on Wednesday. King Fahd acceded the throne on June 13, 1982, following the death of his half-brother King Khalid bin Abdulaziz. During his reign, Saudi Arabia was able to play a leading role in the Middle East and garner a considerable influence in the international arena. King Fahd remained a strong supporter of Arab and Islamic causes. In early 1992, King Fahd introduced some political reforms, including a government law and the reorganization of the succession to the throne. The following year, he set up a 60-member advisory Shura Council and limited ministers' terms to 4 years. King Fahd also developed economic and security ties with other Arab nations of the Gulf Cooperation Council. Following a stroke in 1995, King Fahd briefly handed over state affairs to his half-brother, Crown Prince Abdullah. Since his stroke, the late king has been admitted to hospital on several occasions. Over the past decade, the wheelchair-bound king's public appearances had become increasingly rare. He chaired occasional cabinet meetings but barely spoke in public. King Fahd's brother, Crown Prince Abdullah, who has been running the kingdom's day-to-day affairs since 1995, was swiftly pronounced the new king of Saudi Arabia in a smooth succession that prompted continuity of policies of the key Islamic country. And Defense Minister Prince Sultan bin Abdulaziz was appointed the new Crown Prince. Saudi officials said there will be no change in Saudi Arabia's internal or external policies.
The Crown Prince who has become king, King Abdullah, worked closely with the late King Fahd in implementing the policies of Saudi Arabia, both external and internal. So I cannot imagine that there will be any particular change in that policy, but rather a continuation of the policies undertaken by the late King Fahd.
New Saudi monarch Abdullah bin Abdulaziz said the kingdom's cabinet ministers would retain their posts after the death of King Fahd. A royal decree read out on state television also appointed Crown Prince Sultan, who is also defense minister, as first deputy prime minister, a post King Abdullah had held when he was crown prince. Ordinary people in Saudi Arabia and throughout Arab countries mourn the passing away of King Fahd as a great loss to the Arab world as well as to the Islamic people and in the entire world. Here in Jordan, as flags flew at half-mast, the government declared tomorrow a national holiday and announced 3 days of mourning over the passing away of King Fahd bin Abdulaziz. Deputy Prime Minister Marwan Mashar said, Jordanians remember the strengths of the late king and his support for Arab causes and issues related to the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan in particular. Samir Jamil, Jordan Television.
Oil prices edged higher on news of the Saudi king's death, with U.S. crude rising to $61.23 a barrel before retreating for $61.03, a 46-cent rise. The euro firmed to as high as $1.2223, its strongest level against the dollar since the Chinese yuan revaluation. Saudi officials, however, said the kingdom would stand by its long-standing policy aimed at pumping enough oil to satisfy markets and stabilize prices. The Saudi stock market, the largest Arab bourse, briefly suspended trading, but rebounded after early declines as markets were reassured of a smooth succession in Saudi Arabia. Here in Amman, shares in the stock market lost their gains upon news of King Fahd's death, and the total dealings declined to 48.7 million JDs. The Saudi long-term investments in Jordan are estimated at about $2 billion US. Saudi new King Abdullah, the fifth son of Saudi Arabia's founder, King Abdulaziz, to ascend the throne, is a cautious reformer who has overseen modest economic and political liberalization. 81-year-old King Abdullah has been the central decision-maker in Saudi Arabia for the past decade on issues ranging from oil and the Middle East to the country's 2-year battle against Al-Qaeda militants. He has been a driving force behind economic reform in the world's biggest oil exporter and initiated modest political change when Saudis voted in men-only elections this year for local councils. His Majesty King Abdullah discussed the latest developments in the region as well as Arab and international efforts to combat terrorism with British Prime Minister Tony Blair. During talks in Blair's house, the King and the British Premier expressed their grief over the death of the late Saudi King Fahd bin Abdulaziz, voicing their confidence that Saudi Arabia will pursue its march under the leadership of King Abdullah bin Abdulaziz. The talks, which included a lunch banquet, touched on means to make the Israeli planned withdrawal from Gaza Strip a success. The king stressed that the international community should ensure that the pullout from Gaza will be the first step toward the establishment of an independent Palestinian state. His Majesty called for concerted world efforts to combat terrorism, noting that the majority of terror victims are Muslims, whose religion entirely rejects terrorist acts. This, the king added, has been highlighted during the International Islamic Conference held in Amman early last month. During the several-hour visit to the United Kingdom, His Majesty expressed solidarity with the British people following the recent terror attacks on London. On Iraq, King Abdullah and Tony Blair voiced support for efforts being taken by Baghdad to rebuild Iraq, stressing the need for all Iraqi people to take part in shaping the future of their country.
Iran handed over today a letter to the United Nations International Atomic Energy Agency asking it to remove seals on crucial machinery so that it can resume uranium ore conversion, sensitive nuclear work that may set off an international crisis. A diplomat close to the IAEA, who asked not to be named, said the agency was not, however, moving immediately to remove the seals. European Union negotiators, Britain, France and Germany, have warned Iran that any resumption of either conversion of or enrichment will prompt them to back US-led calls for Tehran's nuclear program to be referred to the United Nations Security Council for possible sanctions. Germany today urged Iran not to take any unilateral steps on uranium enrichment that could endanger the European Union-Iran negotiations. The head of the panel drawing up Iraq's new constitution announced today that a draft would be ready by a mid-August deadline. U.S. officials had hoped easing fears divisions could set back the political process. Hamam Hamoudi, head of the 71-member drafting committee, told Parliament that there were still 5 or 6 points of difference among drafters, but was hopeful they would be resolved on time. Faced with explosive issues such as federalism and the role of religion in the state, the team drafting the constitution had considered taking up to 6 more months to write it up. But the panel came under intense U.S. pressure to submit a draft on time. The Iraqi government and their American backers sees the constitution as a key part of any democratic process and hope it can help defuse the 2-year-old insurgency. Back here in the Sultanate of Oman, the entrusted committee to run the affairs of Oman Equestrian and Camel Federation, chaired by His Excellency Rashid bin Ahmed Al Hinai and the Secretary of the Ministry of Sports Affairs, visited Al Batina region today. The committee met at the Wilaya of Suhar with their excellencies, the walis of the region, heads of local committees, and those who are interested in these committees. During the meeting, they reviewed programs and activities that the Federation will implement during the current session. Also, they discussed how to utilize the royal grant of His Majesty Sultan Qaboos, in which he presented the Federation 1 million Omani Riyals. Besides, they considered the new mechanism to organize camel races, such as specifying the age of camel riders and the age of camels that will participate in the races, modifying the race distances and expanding them during this season. They also talked about safety conditions for riding camels in both the official racing stages and training periods, ways of supporting the training stages and marketing for the benefit of camel breeders, and matters related to preparation of racing grounds in various governorates and regions of the Sultanate of Oman.
Less than 2 days before the close of his term of office, President Mohammad Khatami, accompanied by his cabinet ministers, met with the leader of the Islamic Revolution Monday evening. At the meeting, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei offered his sincere gratitude for the services the outgoing president and his government have rendered over the past 8 years, which, as the leader put it, resulted in substantial progress of Iran in various arenas. The leader added the nation will not forget these great achievements. Ayatollah Khamenei then appreciated President Khatami's positive character and said his deep-seated faith and chastity helped him pass through unfavorable conditions during his tenure. Elsewhere in his remarks, the leader of the Islamic Revolution pointed out that the massive public turnout for all the previous elections lends proof to the fact that the Islamic and democratic features of the Islamic Republic are inseparable. On his part, President Khatami thanked the leader for his support and guidelines for the government over the past 8 years and said he is leaving the office at a time when the nation's 20-year outlook plan has been prepared with viable objectives, and this is indicative of high stability, security and potentialities of the nation. The International Atomic Energy Agency has confirmed it has received Iran's letter over restarting part of its nuclear activity. This comes after Tehran submitted a letter on Monday to the Director General of the International Atomic Energy Agency, reiterating that it would break the seals on a uranium conversion facility in Isfahan. The letter, which is the second in 2 weeks and was signed by Chief Nuclear Negotiator Hassan Rouhani, has stipulated that the reopening of the UCF and resumption of its activities will be under full supervision of the IAEA inspectors. Director General of the International Atomic Energy Agency, Mohammad El-Baradei, is asking Iran to continue talks with the European Troika in response to Tehran's decision to restart uranium enrichment process at Isfahan power plant. El-Baradei said, quote, "I call on Iran to continue the negotiation process with E3 and not to take any action that might prejudice the process at this critical stage when the E3 are expected to deliver a package addressing security, political, economic, and nuclear issues," unquote. Iran's declaration that it would resume limited activities at Isfahan's UCF has triggered concern also among the officials from the EU Big Three. German Foreign Ministry spokesman Jens Plötner warned that resumption of activities in Isfahan's UCF would jeopardize Iran-EU talks and that the European trio are to make their offer to Iran in a few days. Earlier, French Foreign Minister Philippe Douste-Blazy also said Iran's pressuring tactics were unacceptable. Meanwhile, the European Commission spokesman Stefan de Rink urged Iran not to resume its freezed nuclear work. Iranian Parliament Speaker Ghulam Ali Haddad Adel wonders why Western countries that are so concerned about the states in possession of the nuclear know-how fail to react against the Zionist regime's nuclear arsenal. Haddad Adel told the gathering, dubbed Iran's nuclear technology symbol of national will, that it is impossible to find a country in the world that exceeds the Zionist regime in committing acts of terror. He also referred to the double standard policies towards nuclear activities, saying Iran has accomplished confidence-building measures so far and is determined to back peaceful nuclear technology achieved by its youths. And now a brief look at some other news. Iranian departing President Mohammad Khatami held a meeting with Secretary General of Lebanese Hezbollah Hassan Nasrallah on Monday in Tehran and assessed as highly significant the role of the party in the development of the Islamic nation and resistance against the enemies. President Khatami also said Islamic nations, Shiites in particular, are so proud of the party. In a separate meeting, Iranian President-elect Mahmoud Ahmadinejad called Lebanese Hezbollah as the manifestation of pure Islamic thought in defense of Islam. Chairman of Expediency Council Akbar Hashemi Rafsanjani in another meeting said vigilance is necessary for Hezbollah when facing prospective events and foreign pressures. Oil Minister Bijan Namdar Zangani says Iran's annual oil revenues will exceed $40 billion this year for the first time since the victory of the Islamic Revolution 26 years ago, putting the record as unprecedented in the history of Iran's oil industry. Zangani added Iran's crude oil used to be traded for $16.07 per barrel in 1997. That climbed to over $35.5 per barrel last year.
The Children's Education Agency, with help from the Happy Family Group, held a memorial service for the victims of last Wednesday's attacks, where dozens of innocent children in the New Baghdad neighborhood were killed as a result of terrorist attacks with booby-trapped cars. The children did not find a means by which to express the horror of Wednesday's crime in New Baghdad except through their expressive musical performance put forth by the Happy Family Group. The performance touched hearts and brought tears to everyone present at the Arf Auditorium for this memorial service organized by the Children's Education Agency.
Tears overcame me while listening to the musical. The picture became clear to me, and I was able to see the tragedies that took place even though I was not there. But I imagined children playing and running around. They've done nothing wrong. The play is educational and it is effective. Anyone could cry about this. The songs had an impact on me. I couldn't hold back. I had to cry.
Despite the fact that the musical was the embodiment of the sufferings of these children who lost their friends and loved ones on that tragic day, they sent a message of challenge and firmness in the face of terrorism.
Baghdad is the mother who lost many of its children, but it still has many children. But we will live and add to Baghdad, and our message is to live and live for Baghdad.
It is because they are cowards. They can't kill older people, so they kill the children.
Why do they kill the children of Iraq? Aren't they Muslims? And they are killing Muslims? Isn't this wrong?
In this simple performance that is deep in meaning, the play has given part of its message to rebuilding the society and fighting whatever impedes this rebuilding. These people in the audience teared up during the scenes of the play, but one wonders about the children who are being murdered in the roads and alleys while playing. No one seems to lose sleep or feel pained about them. Razak Al-Argili, Al-Iraqiyya, Baghdad.
In the Algerian city of Skikida, libraries continue to open their doors to readers who prefer a quiet setting while reading and spending time with a book to enrich their level of knowledge and satiate their soul amidst endless bounds of information, for the mind is a container that can be filled with a great deal of knowledge. Asia Marat. Beaches are not the only destination during the summer. Far from the sea, many people prefer spending time in the library during the long summer hours. This is the case at one of the libraries in the coastal city of Skikida.
There is a growing interest in libraries among society. Not only is this interest among students, but it is also among others who seek to increase their knowledge and to do research.
Among them is Faris, who enjoys reading about various subjects to fulfill his own interests and enrich his scientific knowledge without having to do it over a specific time.
Some young people join the library as a place to do their homework, but that was not the case for me. When I first came to this library in 2001, I wasn't thinking of using it as a place to do my homework, which I do at home, but rather as a place to enrich my personal knowledge.
I first came as a visitor and toured the Skikda library. I really liked it, and since then I've been coming to read here. Sometimes after we go to the beach, we come to the library to read.
What might be an encouraging factor for going to the library during the summer is the availability of educational reference books. Those in charge created a suitable environment and made these references available in 8 libraries.
The level of educational awareness in society is measured by the number of visits made to the library. From this perspective, Skikda is fortunate because necessary reference books are made available in its libraries.
In spite of the numerous activities offered over the summer, for many individuals, reading remains a great pleasure that cannot be replaced.
The views expressed on Mosaic are not those of Link TV or its sponsors, but of the broadcasters themselves. Mosaic is made possible by a grant from the John S. and James L. Knight Foundation, which promotes journalism excellence worldwide and invests in the vitality of 26 U.S. communities, and the William and Flora Hewlett Foundation. Additional support is provided by the Firedoll Foundation and Henry and Virgilia Dakin.